Hey, everybody, welcome back. Hey, a problem becomes serious when a brand new term is invented for it. So, have you heard of this one? Coronasomnia. I said that. Yep, that is to describe all of the sleep issues that so many people seem to be having during this pandemic. So, if you seem to be yawning your way through the day, lying awake in the middle of the night, we have got sleep expert Colleen Carney here to tell us how we can finally address these issues head on. I feel like we need you now more than ever, Colleen.
Hi, how are you?
Talk to me about the basics here. Can we define what coronasomnia actually is?
All right, obviously it's a made-up term, but it refers to the fact that some people are experiencing insomnia that they were not experiencing it prior to the outbreak. So but there are many different groups. I mean, there are people who've had insomnia before and it got worse. There are people who had insomnia before and they actually are sleeping better, which is very interesting. And then, of course, there's these new cases. So there's lots of stuff going on, and there's also some weird dreams going on. So we've run the whole gamut of sleep issues in these weird times.
So, Colleen, can you differentiate for us what is the difference between, just a bad sleep or a few nights of a bad sleep versus insomnia?
Yeah, so insomnia can be a symptom, right? So it could be you having trouble sleeping, falling asleep, or staying asleep on any given night, and this can be going on periodically. We start to think about it as a disorder, though, when it's happening on at least half the nights or more. It's happening for at least 3 months. There's a daytime component or a serious a functional problem or distress associated with it. So these are the things that we're going to be looking for when we're thinking about a disorder.
When we think about insomnia, a lot of people, including myself, think that it is stress induced, but you say that stress might not actually be the main culprit here.
Yeah, exactly. So stress is often the precipitant, is like the way I like to say it. So it wouldn't be uncommon that something like the outbreak would create some sleep disruption. But once you've had insomnia for a little bit, your body has to adjust to it. And so the things that you have to do to be able to adjust to it can create their own problems, which is not to say in any way that it's your fault, because a lot of it is just a physiologic response to the problem becoming chronic. So one really great example is by virtue of you getting into your bed and spending all that time awake and annoyed, your bed can become conditioned to be the place that you don't sleep. So if you've ever had the experience where you get into your bed and you're ready for sleep and all of a sudden you're wide awake, your bed may have become conditioned to the wakefulness. That's not something that you've done. That's something outside of your awareness, but you're going to need a strategy now to get rid of this secondary problem. So the stress is over, but now there's this other problem too.
How common is insomnia right now? And is it hitting certain groups perhaps more than others?
So insomnia is one of those things that the prevalence rates usually are somewhere between 15 on the upper side, 20%. It is much higher as we age. We have there's lots of reasons for that, including some comorbid medical conditions, in addition to whether or not we stay active and so on. So there's lots of reasons why insomnia can increase as we age. But at this point, it is hitting certainly frontline workers, healthcare workers, because of the shifts, the stress, the long hours. So we're definitely seeing that. There was a study out of China showing that people who were close to the epicenter of the first cases experienced a large jump, which was stress related. But really, we're going to see increases across most age groups. Although a study that we just did at Ryerson showed that young adults actually were sleeping better. So some of the things that were associated with that were they were going to bed later and getting up later, but spending more time in bed, so they were getting the sleep that they needed. And we think the reason why is that early school start times for school, and I've talked about this on the show before, are really not appropriate for that age group. And so they're finally able to follow the schedule that actually biologically, because of puberty, they can follow.
Listen, I work with some easy math here. So if I identify with having coronasomnia, I would assume that once the pandemic's over, so too would be my irregular sleep schedules. Is there any truth to that?
I mean, I think so. I mean, we'll have to see because there are secondary things that happen. If you've had a lot of sleeplessness, you could get that conditioned arousal. In addition, when you first have insomnia, you feel sleepy and you might fall asleep during the day. As you develop insomnia, the fatigue remains, but the sleepiness doesn't. So you become hyper aroused, which allows you to function, but then actually will keep the sleep problem going. So you're tired but wired. So if some of these secondary problems develop as a result of you adjusting to the sleep problem, then unfortunately, when the pandemic is done, you'll still have insomnia. You'll need to be treated.
Listen, I think a lot of times in this pandemic, you think there's a problem and you're trying to look for a quick fix on the internet, whatever that might be. You say that this is kind of an ineffective approach to insomnia. Why so?
Unfortunately, from what I see, and what my students have researched, that a lot of the information on the internet is wrong. So we'll see a lot of people taking advantage and pushing products. I mean, weighted blankets come to mind. I mean, weighted blankets are something that we see in people with sensory disorders, but for sleep, not so much. Anything that you're doing in order to produce sleep is what we call sleep effort. And sleep effort is at the core of insomnia disorder. So if you're like, well, I'm going to pop a melatonin and put on a mask and do this and do this and do this and do this, those are things that are likely to actually make things worse. So you should be thinking about what goes into good sleep naturally. So things like having a regular routine, lots of activity, some daylight exposure, a wind down. These are things that go into good sleep health.
And you say to get ahead on, if we are going through this, is through something called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. What does that treatment actually look like?
So it can look different for different people, but it's essentially two people, the client and the therapist, coming together to develop a routine just for a few weeks that will reset some of their body systems. So it's going to analyze when's the best time for you to be in bed, when's the next best time for you to be out of bed, what kinds of things should you do during the day to make it more likely that you'll be sleepy, and how do we get rid of that conditioned arousal, that bed snapping you awake. There's definitely a way that we can get rid of that. So that's the most common elements of CBT, but you can get it through some self-help CBT books or a CBT app, or you can talk to a therapist.
So if somebody who's watching, you've been tossing and turning all night, at what point do you recommend you should actually just get up out of bed altogether?
Well, I mean, first of all, tossing and turning sounds pretty crappy. So why not get up and do something? Like, why not catch up on some of your binge watching? I would say, rather than a rule of thumb, it should be when as soon as your body is making the sound, you should definitely get up, because you don't want your body you don't want your sleep situation to be paired with that. And but the rule of thumb is usually 10 minutes. So 10 minutes of like you're super alert, probably not a good amount of time for you just to be lying there struggling, trying to make it happen when it's not going to happen.
For our final question, obviously we just set clocks back, daylight saving. So a lot of us are losing daylight, but some of us actually take comfort in the fact that we get that extra hour of sleep. Is that beneficial to our sleep cycles?
It really isn't. I mean, for most people, it's not. You don't really gain an hour per se, the way that it works out. This whole shifting of the clock is not a good idea from a health perspective. So 1 hour, if you notice that you feel different when there's a time change one way or another for the 1 hour, what it is actually your body. It's not about the amount of sleep. It's actually about your body noticing that the cues out in the environment don't match the time that it expects to see. So there's a mismatch. And when that happens, then the whole body rearranges itself around the new cues. This is exactly what happens with jet lag. And so the crappiness that you feel during jet lag is the same. So twice a year, we voluntarily go under jet lag. And for what? I mean, I think it's a bad idea from a health perspective.
Oh, I think you'd have a lot of backing there to eradicate that for sure. Hey, Colleen, fabulous tips as always and so timely. Thank you so much for joining us again.
You're most welcome.
We'll be back right after this.